This really happened to me last fall, and even now, my hands remember the exact weight of the key ring I left behind. I'm not proud of everything I did, but I'm not sorry either. At our anniversary dinner at Gramercy Tavern, while the candle blistered wax and the waiter poured a Merlot I'd spent 20 minutes choosing, I watched Ben tilt his phone under the table and text another woman. The blue light painted his knuckles as he wrote, "Wish you were here instead," and attached a photo of the dessert menu like he was inviting her to steal our night. I knew then the ring of home keys in my purse was about to become a message. I slid the bill toward me, signed with a steady hand, and set the keys on top like a tombstone before I stood, kissed his cheek, and disappeared into the warm New York night. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. When I say I disappeared, I don't mean I magically vanished. I mean I walked straight out onto East 20th Street with my coat open, and my heart pounding slow, purposeful beats, like a drummer measuring time before a march. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I turned left, then right, the city opening around me as if it had just been waiting for me to remember who I was before I was we. On Park Avenue South, I called a rideshare to Astoria, where my friend Janelle kept a futon that had absorbed more girl tears and cheap wine than any therapist's couch in Queens. The driver didn't look at me in the mirror, and I was grateful. I needed the privacy of a stranger as I replayed the way Ben's thumb moved across the glass, confident, proprietary, as if he had a license to split our life into versions, me at the table, her in his pocket. I had met Ben 3 years earlier at a screening at IFC Center on 6th Avenue. The movie was about a diver who didn't know if she wanted to come up for air. Ben laughed at a line that wasn't funny and apologized to the whole row, then bought me a cocoa at the Grey Dog like penance. He had the kind of grin that makes you think he's already on your side. Back then, I wanted to be on someone's side more than I wanted to be on my own. I'm not saying he smelled the need on me, but men like Ben don't fail to notice a door that's already ajar. His job was vaguely important. Partnerships director at a boutique hotel group with properties scattered across Manhattan and Brooklyn, the kind of places where lobby plants are more famous than residents. The Ludlow, 11 Howard, the Public. He collected business cards like prayer cards and touched the small of my back when he introduced me to people named Max and Sloan, and Nika, she's a legend. He always picked restaurants by holding court. Minetta Tavern, the Smith, then late-night martinis at Dante in the West Village, where he'd skim foam with his lip like the drink was just another room bending to him. At first, I thought I was lucky to be chosen. That's ugly to write, but it's true. I worked as a data analyst at a nonprofit in Dumbo, in a brick building on Water Street, that shook when the F train slithered over the Manhattan Bridge. I like my spreadsheets, the way truth slowly emerges if you wait and clean and stare. There's dignity in slowly becoming sure. Ben was the opposite of slow and the opposite of sure. He made decisions in mid-sentence and expected the world to applaud. It often did. I learned to clap in time. The night of our anniversary, I had chosen the wine because I wanted control over something. I told him, no phones, as we sat. He'd grinned and said, "Baby, it's a work thing." The first time the screen lit up under the tablecloth, I pretended not to see. The second time, I watched his eyes unfocus and then refocus on me, as if I were a channel he could flick back to without missing the good part. By the third time, I leaned forward and the candle threw gold into his pupils, and I saw him type a name in that quick, careless way people do with someone they text too often to need to think. Her name was Ava Crescent Moon. I paid and left the keys because I wanted him to know I had seen. I did not want a scene. Gramercy Tavern is too beautiful for scenes. The copper glow, the hush of old wood, the respectful music of cutlery and quiet happiness. Let all his performances happen where he belonged. In mirrors, in lobbies, in rooms with dimmer switches and attentive staff. I wanted the opposite of that, sunlight and fluorescent lights, and the flat white light of emails and records. I wanted the truth in a font you could copy and paste. At Janelle's, I turned my phone face down and slept like a person who'd handed her future to gravity. In the morning, my phone looked like a storm. Ben's text stacked. Where are you? WTF was that? Are you insane? Why would you humiliate me? Pick up. Then a last one, almost gentle. Let's talk like adults. If you don't know the move where your accuser becomes the accused, you haven't dated a man like Ben. He was a master at reframing. If he was late, it was because I was early. If he looked at another woman, it was because I had made him feel undesirable by being distant. He'd say, "You're so intense. It's hot, but it's a lot." He'd wrap "a lot" in a smile so I'd laugh and accept it as a compliment. It is hard to see the side of the glass you live inside. I didn't text back. I showered. I sat at Janelle's kitchen table in my socks and made a list. There's something sacred about lists after you've been unsacred. The pen defines what you can control. My list had 3 categories: what I know, what I suspect, and what I need. Under know, I wrote, he texted Ava during dinner, he lied, he saw me leave the keys, he'll try to make this my fault. Under suspect, I wrote, Ava isn't a one-off, there have been others. The work trips weren't just work, and something in our finances is off. He'd paid the rent late twice last spring, and blamed the bank. He'd once said, corporate is annoying about receipts, no one reads those anyway. Under need, I wrote proof. I did not break into anything. I didn't need to. People like Ben leave trails because they think trails prove they were there, not what they did. We shared a joint account for the rent and groceries. I had online access to our statements. We had an old MacBook at home we barely used since we both relied on our phones. I didn't have the keys anymore, but our building on South Oxford Street in Fort Greene was the kind with a friendly day porter who'd seen me bring cocoa to the doorman at Christmas. I got in easily on my lunch break the next day under the pretext of grabbing a sweater because New York had snapped cold. The apartment looked exactly like it always had. Plants leaning for the window, the framed map of the 5 boroughs above the couch, a pair of his shoes left like punctuation in the hallway. On the kitchen island, the MacBook sat quiet. I lifted the lid, it recognized my face. Ben, so sure of me, had made me an admin years ago. I felt a flicker of grief at how easy trust can be to weaponize. I reminded myself I hadn't brought the weapon. I'd only picked it up. The Photos app opened like a mouth and showed me the holidays we'd faked happiness through, the breakfasts we'd captioned as us, the selfies at the Ace Hotel lobby bar where he'd edited the lighting to a warmer lie. I was not looking for pictures, though. I was looking for patterns. I went to mail. Ben had all his personal email routed to one inbox with filters labeled priority, later, and an ominous one called miscellaneous. I typed Ava in the search bar and my throat tightened as autocomplete suggested not just Ava Crescent Moon, but Ava Westlight, Ava with, and Ava 11 Howard. There were receipts. There were reservation confirmations. There were digital room keys. I opened one. Westlight, the rooftop bar at the William Vale Hotel in Williamsburg. 2 espresso martinis and a plate of tuna tartare on a Tuesday when he'd said he was at a mandatory vendor dinner. I scrolled and saw 11 Howard, a residence-only note, and my own blood turned to ice. I opened an attachment, a hotel statement with incidentals. Champagne. 2 glasses. I took screenshots. I airdropped them to my phone. I moved to bank statements and sorted by merchant. The list was a travelogue of betrayals. The Beekman Hotel, the Bowery Hotel, the Ludlow, his company's properties. But more telling were the small ones. Flower shops in Nolita, a lingerie boutique in Soho, rideshares at 2:14 a.m. to addresses I didn't recognize. The compilation took 2 hours, interrupted by a text from Ben. I'll be home at 7. Be there. The arrogance of it steadied me. I left at 6:15 with my sweater and a folder of printouts I made at the FedEx office on Flatbush, each sheet a piece of a map I was drawing to get myself out. If this were only about cheating, maybe I would have screamed and then cried and then left and then healed. But each receipt told a story that was bigger than my heartbreak. The dates aligned uncomfortably with times he'd bragged about blowing up Q3 and making the spreadsheet boys eat their pencils. There were cash withdrawals that didn't fit. There were refunds credited to a card that wasn't ours. Ben's hotel group had a glossy brochure in our desk drawer, and when I reread his contract, don't ask me why I kept a copy, but I did, I noticed a clause. Company card and hospitality credits reserved strictly for business development with pre-approved partners. Personal use is grounds for immediate termination and legal action. If he had been using company resources on his affairs, that wasn't only betrayal, it was theft. Theft from people whose names I would never know. The housekeepers, the bartenders, the desk clerks, whose raises shrank a few dollars because someone like him siphoned off the blood. Cheating on me was a choice. Cheating at work was a habit. I called in sick the next day and built a spreadsheet. You'd think heartbroken people can't hold concentration, but I could. It attached to me like armor. Every line item got a category: date, merchant, time, purpose, stated, purpose, probable. I gathered screenshots of texts, redacting numbers that weren't his or hers. It took me 10 hours to clean the data, and then 2 more to make it sing. I wrote a summary in plain language because I know what administrators need: dates, facts, policies violated, and a tone that says, I know you didn't ask for this, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. At midnight, Janelle came home from her shift at Mount Sinai West and slid a plate of reheated pasta in front of me like a communion. You look possessed, she said gently. I'm compiling, I said. Compiling what? The truth. She Saturday, you're scaring me a little. Good, I said and realized I meant it. I think he's been stealing from his job. I told her about the receipts, the dates, the clause in the contract. She didn't gasp or call me crazy. Nurses don't have the leisure of shock. She nodded and said, Don't confront him without a plan. Men like that only understand consequences. What's a consequence? I asked, and Janelle smiled slowly like I was finally asking the right questions. Losing the thing they think they deserve. I slept 4 hours and woke with the clarity of a cold morning. I drafted an email to the hotel group's compliance department and HR. I didn't send it. Timing matters. You don't swing until you've lined up the pins. Ben called at 9. I let it go to voicemail. Babe, this is getting childish, he said with that silky snideness he reserved for moments he wasn't being obeyed. You made a scene. You embarrassed me. You owe me an apology. We're not teenagers. I replayed it once and saved it in a folder labeled Voice. At lunch, I walked to the Kings County Supreme Court on Adams Street, the building's facade stern as apparent. I sat on the steps and watched daredevils on city bikes cross against the light. I wasn't seeking a restraining order. I was seeking proximity to consequences. I needed to breathe a place where justice is at least considered. It's amazing how your spine learns from stone. I set a date in my head. The company's fall gala at the Plaza Hotel. Ben had been buzzing about it for weeks, calling it our Met Gala. He'd said the CEO would be there, partners from LA, a couple of influencers whose names made him sound like a teenager trying on fame in front of the mirror. If I sent the dossier too early, he might wriggle out, spin the narrative, preempt me with flair and flattery. I wanted him on a stage when the floor gave way. I wanted him in a tuxedo holding a flute of stolen champagne when the lights got too bright. So, I bought a dress at Century 21, something black and sharp that made me feel like a blade. I texted a friend from college, Ruthie, who was now in white-collar investigations. She agreed to meet me at Buvette, the tiny French place in the West Village, where the noise makes eavesdropping impossible. I laid out the receipts. I told her about the clause. I played the voicemail. She sipped her coffee and said, This isn't just cheating. It's misuse of company assets and potentially tax fraud if he wrote this off. You could send this anonymously. But since you're named on some of the cards, you should also protect yourself. Protect myself how? Document that you didn't know and didn't consent. Send from a new email. BCC yourself. Timestamp everything. And Nora, she put her hand on mine. Don't be in a room alone with him until this is over. That night, under the glow of a borrowed desk lamp at Janelle's, I created a burner email and attached the files. I wrote a concise cover note. I am sharing evidence suggesting a senior employee has been misusing company property and violating policy. I believe prompt review is in the company's interest, as well as the interest of your employees whose labor is being exploited for personal gain. I included a list of dates, transactions, and the policy clause. I CC'd HR and the General Counsel's office. Then I scheduled it to send at 7:05 p.m. on the night of the gala. For the next 4 days, I performed normalcy like a role. I went to work. I answered emails. I made small talk about commuting times and the best bagel on Atlantic Avenue. It's Court Street Bagels, you can fight me. I did not answer Ben. He escalated. Messages to my mother, is Nora okay? To Janelle, please ask her to be reasonable. To mutual friends, she's spiraling. The thing about a smear campaign is it counts on you defending yourself too early. I kept the silence like a weapon in its sheath. On the afternoon of the gala, I took the F to 57th Street and walked the last blocks beneath trees that were just starting to blush red. The plaza was performing plaza, doormen crisp, tourists craning, a bridal party screaming near the fountain in Central Park like joy might shatter if it wasn't loud. I slipped inside the lobby and hid in the hallway by the Palm Court, watching the event staff assemble a fantasy. Towers of glassware, a photo wall, a stage with a sign that read in gold. Horizon Group, celebrating excellence. A man tested a microphone. Check, check, good evening. And even that sounded expensive. At 6:58 p.m., I stood in the restroom, a room grander than most apartments I've lived in, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like a woman I would not want to cross. I opened the email scheduler and confirmed the clock. At 7:03, I texted Ruthie one word. Now. She replied with a thumbs up. At 7:04, I slipped into the ballroom behind a column where I could see the stage and a slice of entry. At 7:05, the email flew. Ben arrived at 7:12 on my watch, dressed in black tie, his hair behaving like it knew it was supposed to impress. He laughed too loud in the foyer and shook the CEO's hand like a man who believes in mirrors. I watched him introduce Ava to a man with a pocket square and felt heat rise to my cheeks, and then gutter out. She had the kind of beauty you think was invented for movies, but I wasn't here to rank her face. I was here to collapse his story. On stage, the VP of brand welcomed the room. Applause rolled like soft thunder over carpet. Ben was 3 heads back from the aisle, grinning as if the spotlight was flirting with him. Then, as the VP introduced the CEO, there was a commotion near the side doors. 2 security managers, earpieces curving behind their ears, entered with a woman from HR who looked like she'd aged a decade in a minute. She scanned a printout and then the room, and then found Ben. She tapped his shoulder. He turned and smiled with rehearsed warmth until he recognized her expression. His smile fell like a dropped chair. They spoke for less than 10 seconds. He protested softly, like a good actor playing an innocent man. She said something and handed him the printout. He read. He turned page 1. He turned page 2. I watched his throat work like he'd swallowed a stone. Security edged discreetly closer, professional as surgeons. Then his boss stepped in, face red with the pressure of being blindsided in public. Ben tried charm first, he always did. He touched his chest as if to say, "Me." He placed a hand on the HR woman's elbow, as if this were a misunderstanding that could be fixed by tone. The CEO was now at the mic, thanking the sponsors. I could feel the exact second the email hit his phone. His voice tripped, then smoothed, then tightened. The room is a creature that detects fear the way sharks detect blood. Ben's voice rose. The HR woman shook her head. Security placed their bodies at just the right angle that looked like nothing and meant everything. I watched the moment he realized that all the doors he usually found unlocked were braced. He looked around for an ally and found none because the thing about allies is they believe in the weather. When the wind changes, they turn. He scanned the room like he had lost something and then, impossibly, his eyes found mine. I didn't look away. I let him register that I was there to see him fall. And then, God help me, I smiled. Not wide. Just enough to say, I told the truth and now it is telling you back. They escorted him out. It was tidy, professional, the way you throw a party and take out the trash without the guests having to notice. But people noticed. People always notice. The CEO, now pale, spoke quickly about ethics, about excellence meaning integrity. There was a tremor in his voice like a man who wants to be anywhere but a stage. Applause came, confused and then dutiful. I stayed where I was until the room absorbed the shock and took the shape of denial again. In the corridor, I checked my burner email. HR had replied, "We have received your report and initiated an immediate review. We may reach out for additional information." For minutes later, "We have suspended the employee pending investigation." 2 minutes after that, a note from the General Counsel's office asking for a phone call at your earliest convenience. Then a third. "We would appreciate any context indicating whether you were aware of or consented to this use of company property." I typed, "I did not know, I did not consent." Documentation attached. I attached a copy of the contract clause and a list of every transaction with notes. I included a sentence I knew a lawyer couldn't unsee. "I believe this conduct has persisted over at least 18 months and may involve tax mischaracterizations." When I stepped out onto Fifth Avenue, the city was cold enough to make your breath holy. I was 5 blocks south when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but control sometimes looks like answering. I pressed green. "Is this Nora?" a woman said. "Yes. This is Elise from Horizon Group. We need to ask a few clarifying questions." Her voice was composed, professional, but underneath was fatigue, the kind that comes from finding a rotten beam in the structure you thought was sound. "Of course," I said. She asked clean questions. I gave clean answers. Dates, times my employment, my residency status. Then, carefully, "Do you anticipate any retaliation?" I watched a handsome cab roll by, ridiculous and beautiful. "From him?" I asked. "He'll try to call me names until he runs out of breath." I paused. "From your company?" "I don't know you. But I know this. What I sent you is either a gift or a threat depending on who you are." There was a beat. Then, honesty, she said. "It's a gift." I walked to the Pulitzer fountain, where the water threw itself up and fell back unchanged. My phone buzzed again. "Ben." Voicemail. I listened to my own heart before I listened to him. He sounded breathless and furious, the way he got when a cab cut him off, except this time the cab was his life. "You did this," he hissed. "You're vindictive. You'll regret it. I will ruin you." His voice used to make me softer. Now it made me steel. I saved the voicemail in voice and forwarded a transcript to Elise with the subject, "Possible retaliation." She replied in less than a minute. Noted. Documenting. I went back to Janelle's and stood in her kitchen with the refrigerator door open, cold air spilling around my thighs. She raised an eyebrow. "It worked," I said. "Good," she said. "Hungry." "Starving." We ate in companionable quiet. The TV murmured about something that didn't matter. My phone stopped being a storm and started being a record of weather. Around midnight, a text came from an unknown number. "We have placed the employee on administrative leave effective immediately pending a full review." 3 minutes later, a second. "We are also reviewing credit card and expense policies across the entire company. Your discretion is appreciated." I slept 8 hours and dreamed of rooms with many doors. In the morning, I woke to a ping from Ruthie. He lawyered up, which is good. Means he knows he's cornered. I was brushing my teeth when someone buzzed Janelle's apartment. She froze, mouthful of toothpaste. "Who is it?" she asked into the intercom. "Delivery," a voice said. She frowned, buzzed the door, and we waited. A man in a blue jacket handed me a small box tied with twine. No return address, just my name. Inside, my key ring. The house key, the mailbox key, the bike lock key. All the small teeth that used to belong to a life. Taped to them, a note in Ben's handwriting. "You're not as smart as you think." I held the keys and felt no ache, only a flare, like flint struck on steel. If keys are a promise, then returning them is an ending. But ending what? Our lease was month to month. My name was on it as much as his. He thought he was saying I was out. He didn't know what I was already building. I spent the next 2 days in motion. I moved my clothes, my notebooks, my framed photo of my mother laughing on the Coney Island boardwalk, to a storage unit on Nevins Street. I took my name off the Con Edison account and submitted a change of address form at the post office on Atlantic Avenue, the clerk stamping with a rhythm like a heartbeat. I told our landlord I was stepping off the lease at the end of the month and sent the email with Ben's CC'd, just to watch the way words become walls. I didn't tell anyone where I'd sleep next. Secrets make warm blankets when you're being hunted by a man who thinks he owns your narrative. Elise called again to confirm a few items and asked, almost casually, if I knew the names of any other women. I don't care who he slept with, I said. But you'll find the names when you match receipts to guest lists. Look at Westlight reservations under short notice. Look at room keys issued after midnight. She made a sound that might have been admiration. What made you look? She asked. Because I was tired of living a version he edited, I said. And because I work with data. The numbers always tattle eventually. On the third day, I stood outside our building with a canvas tote and watched Ben arrive in a black car. He got out too fast and looked around too much. He was still beautiful in the way a dangerous animal is beautiful, all lines and attention. He saw me and approached with that controlled coil energy I used to mistake for power. You've made a mistake, he said low. Probably, I said. But not tonight. He glanced at my tote. You don't have to go, he said, a performance of mercy. I already did, I said. You humiliated me, he whispered. Do you know what you've cost me? Not enough, I said, and realized my voice was steady not because I was brave, but because I was done being afraid. He stepped closer. You think HR will protect you? He asked. You think they won't come after you for privacy violations? For accessing my emails? I accessed a family computer, I said. Password-free. And I sent work-related misuse to a compliance department whose job is to stop it. If there are consequences for me, I'll face them. But you'll face yours first. He stared, calculating. He had always been good at numbers when they were people. You're going to regret this, he said again, like repetition could alchemize a threat into a prophecy. I already regret loving you, I said, and watched the words land. He flinched, the first honest movement of the night. A neighbor stepped out and the hallway swallowed him. I stood and let the fall air rinse me. My phone buzzed. A new email from Horizons Council. We have concluded our preliminary review. Significant misuse detected. Employment terminated. A second email followed. We are initiating reimbursement and reporting processes. If you receive any communications that concern you, please forward to this address. I raised my head and saw Ben's silhouette in the lobby go still when his phone lit up. He punched the air like a man fighting an invisible thing. He turned to the door, as if he might come out and try a different tactic, softer or harder, but he didn't. He stood and read again and then sank onto the bench, a man who never thought the floor would fail him. I should have felt triumph. Maybe a part of me did. But mostly I felt tired, and then strangely light. Revenge is not a meal you savor, it's a fever that breaks. I lifted my tote and walked toward Fulton Street, toward the G train, toward whatever came next that didn't have his fingerprints on it. My phone pinged again. A withheld number. I answered without thinking. Is this Nora? A male voice asked, clipped. Who's asking? This is Detective Myers with the 19th Precinct. We've received a report we need to discuss with you concerning potential unauthorized access and harassment. He paused. We'd like you to come in and give a statement. For a second, the world narrowed to a pinpoint, and then opened again. There it was, the counterpunch. He hadn't wasted time. I looked up at the Cathedral of Oaks shaking their leaves loose along South Oxford Street, and felt something inside me recalibrate. War wasn't over because a job ended. War was patient. When? I asked, because if you want to win, you accept the invitation to the arena on your terms. Tomorrow morning, he said. 9 a.m., if that works. It does, I said. But detective? I added. Yes. You'll want to see an email I'm sending you tonight. I hung up and started walking, already building the next list in my head, already feeling the cold clarity that comes before a fight you decided to finish. The email I sent Detective Myers that night was clean, time-stamped, and unromantic. A PDF of the expense dossier. the photo of the contract clause, a log of the dates and times I accessed the shared MacBook, and the audio file of Ben's voicemail where he promised to ruin me. I added a paragraph in plain language. I accessed a household computer without circumvention. I did not access any work servers or protected systems. I reported misuse of corporate funds to the employer's compliance team. Attached are materials relevant to a retaliatory complaint I anticipate the other party has made. I CC'd myself and Ruthie and shut the laptop like I was closing a chapter. Janelle brewed coffee at 6:30 a.m. the next morning and watched me knot my hair with surgical attention. "You've rehearsed what you'll say?" she asked. "I'll tell the story like the truth can be told only once," I said. "The 19th precinct on East 67th is clean in the way a hallway is clean before the crowd arrives. A few officers moved papers, a printer insisted on its drama, and a woman in a navy sweater with the tired eyes of a person who hears too many stories pointed me to a row of chairs. Detective Myers came out at 9:05 on the dot, tall, trim mustache, a jaw that looked borrowed from a detective show. He shook my hand like a man who wants you to know he can shake gently. "Ms. Vargas," he said. "Yes," I said. "I sent you." He lifted a hand slightly. "I saw. Let's talk inside." The interview room was smaller than on TV, with a window that didn't open and a table that remembered everyone who'd leaned on it. Ruthie slid into the chair beside me, legal pad out like a talisman. Myers pressed record on a small device and recited a time and a case number with the careful diction of a professional whose notes sometimes have to hold up in court. He started simple. "Tell me what happened from your perspective." I told it. How I saw the text at Gramercy Tavern. How I left the keys. How I went back for a sweater and found emails on a household computer I had permission to use for 3 years. How the receipts told a story bigger than my heartbreak. I gave him dates, names of the hotels, the Ludlow, the Beekman 11 Howard, the time stamps on the room keys, the language of the company's policy. Finally, I described the gala at the plaza and the way their HR and security approached Ben like they knew exactly what to do when someone thinks the rules are abstract. Myers listened like the best kind of audience. No interruptions, no theatrics, no rush. "Okay," he said when I finished, flipping open a folder. "We received a complaint late last night from Mr. Sanford alleging harassment and unauthorized access to his email." He glanced at my attachments. "The email account you looked at was on a shared laptop you had access to as a household member?" "Yes," I said. "No password to bypass, no remote access. No company servers." He nodded, neutral. "And you've emailed his employer's legal and HR departments, providing the materials you found?" "Yes." He tapped the printout of my voicemail transcript. "And this is a message he left you?" "Just after he was escorted out of his gala," I said. It felt like important context in case he tried to reverse it. Myers clicked the device off and leaned back. "I'm going to say something plain," he said. "We have to take every complaint seriously. Sometimes that means sorting wheat from chaff. From where I sit, this looks like a civil and corporate matter he is trying to drag into a criminal frame because the consequences are landing on him." He glanced at Ruthie. "Counsel, you can correct me." "Not going to," Ruthie said. She accessed a shared device without circumvention. It's not unauthorized computer access under New York law. The voicemail's tone is arguably a threat. At minimum, it's harassing. And there's a good faith corporate report here. If anything, your complainant is the one looking shaky." Myers nodded. "We're going to document his complaint, attach your materials, and make a notation. We will reach out to him to advise that pursuing false claims is a bad hobby. If you receive any further messages, especially threats, forward them to me. If he shows up anywhere near you, call us immediately." He slid a card across the table. "And consider an order of protection. Family court can issue one for intimate partners, even without cohabitation." I breathed for what felt like the first time in 24 hours. I thought orders of protection were only for spouses. "Not in New York," he said. "Intimate partners qualify. The family court is at 60 Lafayette. They'll walk you through the petition." "And the harassment complaint?" I asked. He folded his hands. We'll note that you provided a credible basis for your conduct. We'll note that he's under internal investigation for financial misconduct. That tends to change the temperature when someone tries to frame revenge as criminality. He slipped my attachments into the folder. I appreciate when people bring order to their own chaos, he added. You made my job easier today. On Lafayette, the family court building rose out of the traffic like a stern ant. Inside, the waiting room carried that specific mix of stale coffee and human crisis you can't quite air out. A clerk with silver hair printed forms and pointed to a table where a volunteer attorney explained what intimate relationship meant under the statute. Ruthie sat with me as I described the voicemail, the texts, the unexpected box with my keys, the fact that he knew where my best friend's apartment was and had already used that to get to me. We filed the petition, and a judge with an expression like tempered glass heard me at 3 in the afternoon. She read the transcript of his "I will ruin you" message and looked up at me in a way that said she didn't need to be convinced that words are prequels to deeds. "Temporary order granted," she said, and slid the paper toward me. "No contact. No harassing, no stalking, no third-party contact. Sheriff will serve him." I stepped into the crisp October air and felt the order like a thin wall. It wasn't a fortress, but it was a line, and lines matter. My phone buzzed with a message from Elise at Horizon Group. "We've moved to termination for cause. We will be seeking reimbursement. Our outside counsel is evaluating referrals." 2 minutes later, a second message came in from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Rebecca Levin, outside counsel for Horizon. We would like a brief call to confirm certain vendor invoices unrelated to your report." The word "unrelated" in a lawyer's mouth means extending. We took the call on a bench across from the court, traffic fussing on Center Street. Levin's voice was precise and dispassionate as a scalpel. "Ms. Vargas, do you recognize the name Atlas Creative? Or Atlantic Event Partners?" "I didn't," she explained. "We've identified a pattern of approvals for vendor entertainment associated with 2 entities. Our preliminary look shows their mailing address is an apartment building in Ridgewood. One is registered to a woman who shares a last name with Mr. Sanford's cousin." The world made a sick, perfect kind of sense. I could see him texting from our couch about Q3 wins, while he set up fake vendors and billed champagne to a company that trusted him to be an adult. "I don't have independent knowledge," I said, "but it tracks with what I saw." "Thank you," Levin said. "We may follow up. And Ms. Vargas? We appreciate what you did. This is how rot gets stopped." The next 48 hours were both fast and slow. Fast in the way a rumor becomes a fact when an email goes around. Slow in the way your breath catches up to your body only after the sprint. Mutual friends surfaced like submarine periscopes, disoriented and opportunistic. "You could have just left him," one wrote, careful and cutting. "Why go after his job?" Another texted at midnight. "Honestly, he's always been a star. It's sad to see cancel culture take down someone who works hard." I read each message once and moved it to an archive named "Wait, I Don't Carry." Ava texted me on the 3rd day, a number I didn't recognize in my phone with a name I'd seen glowing blue under a table. "Nora," she wrote. "It's Ava. I got your number from a mutual. I didn't know about you. I didn't know about all of it. I'm sorry. A beat. He told me you were crazy." A second message. "If it helps, I have screenshots of him asking me to invoice as a consultant to track comps. I didn't. It felt wrong. But I can share. We met at Joe Coffee on the corner of Waverly and Gay. She was quieter than I expected, her moon emoji chosen perhaps by someone else once upon a time. She slid her phone across the table, and I scrolled through texts that would be surgeons' scalpels in the right hands. Ben telling her to send a small invoice under Atlas, just standard, will get it taken care of. And when she hesitated, "No one checks this." He'd even sent sample language. Hospitality research consulting, scope, influencer partnership exploration. It was the kind of lie designed to skate across the ice of a busy executive's morning. "I didn't do it," Ava said. "But I also didn't stop seeing him." She swallowed. "He made me feel like the rules were stupid if they got in the way of the story he was telling." He's very good at that, I said and pushed my coffee aside. I'm not the police. I'm not HR. I'm not the moral authority. You don't owe me contrition. But if you want what he did to end, send those screenshots to this attorney. I wrote Levin's email on a napkin. He will try to turn you into a weapon against me if you let him. Don't. She nodded, eyes bright with a complicated grief that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with the mirror she'd been staring into. He told me you paid the bill and walked out like a diva, she said with a ghost of a smile. I think you walked out like a surgeon. A week later, an envelope arrived at Janelle's apartment with Horizon Group letterhead. Inside, a letter thanking me for my report, noting the termination for cause, outlining the reimbursement process, and crucially including a line. Our investigation confirms that you did not authorize or benefit from any misuse. We appreciate your cooperation. It was not exactly absolution, but functionally, it was the kind of sentence you pull out of a drawer when someone doubts your weather report. Detective Myers called to confirm that the temporary order of protection had been served. He was not happy, he said, and I could hear faintly the dry humor of a man who has seen 1,000 variations of the same human tantrum. We advised him about criminal contempt. You should be safe. Stay smart. Staying smart is my new hobby, I said. I avoided our old blocks, our old bars, the way you avoid food poisoning twice. But New York is a planet of collisions. I saw Ben 2 weeks later in the lobby of the Beekman when I cut through to avoid the wind on Nassau. He was standing near the desk, not in a tuxedo this time, not holding court, just waiting. It took me a second to recognize him without the sheen of invincibility, like seeing a movie star without the light. He saw me and took a half-step forward, then checked himself, mindful of the paper in his pocket that could drag him into a courtroom if he so much as raised his voice within a certain radius. You did this, he said, quietly enough to honor the marble. No, I said, matching his volume. You did. I just filed. His smile arrived late and wrong. You always loved filing, he said. So tidy. So sure. I love the truth, I said. It's not tidy, but it's sure. A bellman I recognized with a kind face watched us the way hotel staff watches the weather. Ben glanced past me toward the bar, where a new class of him held their drinks like promises. You think they won't hire me again? He asked, a real question peeking out like a bone. You think I don't know people? I think people know you now, I said. And I think compliance departments talk to each other in this town faster than gossip. Something softened and then hardened in his eyes. I loved you, he said, and the past tense was either a mistake or a confession. You loved what I looked like standing next to you, I said. There's a difference. Security approached, gentle but ready. Ben saw them and put his hands up like a man who knows the choreography now. He backed away, smile fixed, and walked toward the glass doors and the world where he would have to build something with no comped champagne in it. On a cloudy Tuesday in November, Levin called with a voice that carried the kind of detail that only comes from long hours. We've reached a settlement agreement with Mr. Sanford, she said. He's repaying a portion of the funds and has signed a consent to a mutual non-disparagement clause. So he can't ruin me? I asked, more tired than triumphant. He can try, she said dry. But the first person he speaks to gets our letter. Also, we made a referral to the Manhattan DA's office on the shell vendors. That's not your business anymore, and you don't need to be involved. I thought you'd want to know. After the call, I walked into the cold and caught the F at Carroll Street, the car crowded and humming with strangers' small lives. Someone was crying quietly behind a book. Someone else was showing a child the skyline through scratched plexiglass, saying, "Look, that's where they keep the pictures," when the Brooklyn Museum slid by. My reflection looked like someone I might sit next to by choice. Back at Janelle's, I stood at her window with a mug of tea and watched the world flicker room by room. She came up behind me, pressed her chin lightly to my shoulder. You look different, she said. I feel unedited, I said. On the first Friday of December, I walked into Gramercy Tavern alone. The host recognized nothing in my face. Why should he? This time I sat at the bar. I ordered a glass of red, I didn't need to explain. I didn't touch my phone. A candle blistered wax. The men on either side of me were perfectly polite and perfectly elsewhere. The city held me without narrative. The check came and I paid it because I was there and I could. I left no keys because I had new ones now. Janelle's spare, a locker at a gym on Atlantic, a storage unit where my life sat in boxes waiting for a different kind of opening. I stepped out onto East 20th Street, and the air had the clean bite of a beginning. A week later, an email landed in my inbox from a name I didn't recognize at a nonprofit in Manhattan that had heard, through Ruthie, that I was a freak for data, direct quote. They needed someone patient and relentless to audit their donor files and clean their intake processes. They couldn't pay lobby bar money, but they could pay enough, and they could look me in the eye at 5 and say, "Go home." I said yes. The night before I moved my boxes out of storage into a small one-bedroom on Butler Street with a fire escape you could sit on if you moved the plant, I took a long walk to the Manhattan Bridge. The East River shrugged under me. The city did its impersonation of the Milky Way. I thought about revenge and what it had and hadn't given me. It hadn't made me whole. It hadn't rewound anything. But it had done one crucial thing. It had moved the story out of his mouth. On my first night in the Butler Street apartment, I slept on a mattress on the floor among boxes labeled like Truth's a librarian. Kitchen, books, linens, records, proof. In the morning, light came through the blinds like a clean sheet pulled over me. I made a list on a yellow legal pad, because I still believe in lists. At the top I wrote, "What I know now." Under it, "No one who loves you asks you to be smaller. Silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's strategy. Keys are not love, they are leverage. He can look at you and not see you. You can look at him and finally see yourself." I taped the list inside the hall closet, where coats will grow and shrink with seasons, and I will forget it's there until one day I hang a damp umbrella, and the paper flutters, and I'll remember a younger version of me stood here and declared something simple and dangerous. I am mine. Months later, in March, I got a voicemail from Detective Myers I saved, not because it made me happy, but because it completed the circle. "Ms. Vargas," he said, "thought you'd like to know the DA's office did file a complaint on falsifying business records in the second degree relating to those shell vendors. You're not listed as a witness. Your materials were useful in the corporate referral. This is FYI only." He paused, and his voice softened half a shade. "Take care." I took a walk up to the Brooklyn Heights promenade and watched the harbor pretend to be still. Somewhere across the river, a version of Ben was telling a different story to a different room, his voice choosing the parts of him that sounded like a man you'd want to believe. I didn't need to correct him. Rooms choose their ghosts. I'd chosen mine. On a Sunday in April, Janelle and I went to Coney Island just because my mother had laughed there in a photograph. We ate Nathan's hot dogs and took stupid pictures by the Wonder Wheel. And when a man walked by with a bunch of helium balloons the color of sherbet and sky, Janelle bought me one for no reason at all. I held the string and felt it tug against the wind, a simple physics of equal and opposite that used to terrorize me and now felt like a dance I finally knew the steps to. As the sun browned and the air went blue, we sat on a bench and watched the ocean pretend to be infinite. "Think you'll ever go back to Gramercy Tavern with somebody?" Janelle asked, eyes squinting at a horizon that never answers. "Maybe," I said, "but I don't need to. That table was a trap and a test." I passed. She bumped my shoulder with hers. "You burned the table down." "No," I said, looking at the water as it came and went and stayed. "I just moved to a different room." Later that night, in my kitchen that still smelled like cardboard and lemon, I opened a drawer where I keep the unglamorous tools of a life, batteries, rubber bands, a tape measure that snaps back too hard if you don't respect it. On top of the chaos lay my old key ring, the one he mailed like a curse, the metal gone dull with waiting. I lifted it and felt its remembered weight. Then I set it down and reached for my new keys. The tarnished brass to Butler Street, the skinny one that opens the laundry room, the stubby one for the mailbox that always sticks on rainy days. They were heavier because they belonged to me. I turned off the light, and the apartment went dark in that soft way a room does when it trusts you. I stood still and listened, not for a phone, not for a voice, but for the click of my own lock as it turned closed and then open, a sound I would come to love. The night outside went about its business. Somewhere the city let another secret out. I washed my hands and watched the water go from cold to warm, and I thought, there are so many ways to vanish. The best one is to become someone he can't recognize, even if he's standing right in front of you. I went to bed with the window cracked to let the sound of Atlantic Avenue curl through the screen. I could hear taxis telling their side of things, a couple arguing about whether to move to Astoria, someone laughing hard enough to make the night forgive itself. I closed my eyes and carried nothing across the mattress but air. In the morning, I would wake and make coffee and go to a job where the numbers would behave if I asked them kindly. I would pass the courthouse on Adams and nod at Stone. I would step back into Gramercy Tavern someday for no reason at all, and order dessert first just to spite a ghost. I would keep the order of protection in a folder, but not in my mouth. I would keep the list in the closet, but not in my blood. I would walk across the bridge whenever my head felt heavy and let the river hold it up. This really happened to me last fall, and even now, my hands remember the exact weight of the key ring I chose not to carry anymore. I'm not proud of everything I did, but I'm not sorry either. The candle burned down, the bill was paid, the door clicked shut. Somewhere, he's still rehearsing a face he thinks will get him in. I'm already home. The end.